Welcome to this week's episode of the Soto Mojo Podcast. My name is Trevor, and normally I have Ethan with me, and we're just a couple of high school baseball coaches from Tacoma who love talking Mariners baseball. Obviously, without my companion over here to my right, we have had a really busy schedule the last couple weeks. Last week we had a lot going on, and then our producer needed to get this show up as well. And so we just ran into a bunch of things that normally don't happen last week. So we appreciate your patience that the show was released a little bit later than normal. But recording today, May 30th on Thursday, right before the last game of the Houston series. And looking forward to breaking down what the last week has looked like, but going to be flying solo today. So appreciate you listening in, and hope that we can get through some things here today and still feel like we're updated on what the Mariners are up to recently. So let's start with around the league. There wasn't a ton that went around this last week. I mean, a few injuries here or there, some minor trades, things like that. But let's get to it. Initially here, one thing I did want to make note of that I thought was pretty cool is that the league decided to integrate the Negro League stats into the MLB stats, which updated a bunch of stuff. And I thought it was really neat to see that, especially during that time period when baseball was where it was. There wasn't a big differentiation between the level of play or the skill of play. And so, in my opinion, it makes sense to combine those records, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, there's going to be people that agree, people that disagree, all that to be said. It is what it is, and baseball is baseball, and it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. I think everybody should be included with that, especially with that was the professional league that was there at the time. So I think it makes all the sense in the world to combine those stats, and I think that's good for the game altogether. So good for them. Great move there. Did want to start with the Braves. It feels like the Braves had the most things that were happening in this last week that were of interest to anybody. So they called up AJ Smith-Shawver. He was dealing, had only thrown 4 innings so far, was one of their prospects. He did come up for a little bit in 2023 and then came back up just now, and then immediately goes down with a strained left oblique. And so the Braves then called up their number 3 overall prospect, Spencer Schwellenbach, and we'll see what that ends up turning out to be. It sounds like he's a pretty good player, and it'll be really interesting to see how his career pans out. But he is their number 3 overall prospect. So anytime a team calls up a top 5 prospect, it is noteworthy, regardless of what team it is. Obviously, as Mariners fans, we're excited about our top 5 prospects and what they're going to do and what they mean for the team. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what that ends up looking like for the Braves. They did sign Ramon Laureano, who was DFA'd by Cleveland. Interesting pickup for them. Outfield depth, as that's continued to be a struggle for the Braves. But Laureano, man, when he was with the Athletics, he was a dog. And so it's interesting to see that Cleveland DFA'd him. Obviously, Cleveland's been playing really well. But it is interesting to see him move on to another team, has sneaky power, and could be one of those guys that is just better in a different situation. And obviously the Braves being the Braves takes the pressure off of your production when you have other guys up and down the lineup that are also producing. But the reason why they have some depth is because Ronald Acuna Jr. Went down with an ACL. So we saw him breaking for third. It didn't look like he was trying to steal third. It was looking like he was like pump faking or something. He's deking the fielders out a little bit and looked like he made a hard turn back to second base. And you could tell he went down in a heap, was in a lot of pain. And it was a torn ACL. So another injury, add it to the list of a big name. Terrible for baseball, man. Hate to see a big name like that going down. He's obviously out for the remainder of the 2024 season. We'll see when he gets back in the 25 season. Obviously, ACL injuries are a little tricky and take longer, but the surgery has continued to get more and more efficient. The recovery has become more and more efficient for professional athletes. So they come back sooner and sooner, honestly. Every year that goes by, I'm always surprised at how fast guys are coming back from ACL surgery. So hopefully he'll be back soon. But that is why the Braves are looking for outfielders there. Moving on to an opponent that we've seen recently, and we will go through the last 2 games that the Mariners played against them. But man, Aaron Judge went from a guy that Yankees fans were booing to another MVP potential year. He has been absolutely shredding at the plate. He's doing everything he normally does in the field. Honestly, I think Judge being good is good for baseball. As much as I hate the Yankees, but you have to look at him and just respect what he is and what he does. I mean, every time he goes to the plate, like I'm clenching fists, waiting to see what happens because he's just that special of a player. And even when he was struggling, you still have to feel that way. You still have to pitch around him. You still have to be really smart. And we actually held him down the first 2 games, as we talked about last week. But then the next 2 games that I'm going to talk about today came back to be who he was. Another interesting one. So we just played the Nationals as well. Again, I'll get into the game logs here in just a second. But they did DFA Victor Robles before or right after our series against them. So the fans were celebrating all over X. So obviously that was a good move for them. I think he's good. Like I know that he has had a rough year this year, had a rough year last year. I understand. And so he's just an interesting, it'll be really interesting to see where he ends up. We obviously don't know that yet, but it will be interesting to see where he ends up and see if he can get back to form. One of the biggest news stories that's come out just in the last 24 hours is Mets pitcher Jorge Lopez kind of got himself into some hot water, ended up getting himself fired. So he had a rough game, was getting pulled out of the game as he's coming off the field, throws his glove into the stands. The whole team, it's just not a good situation, right? Mets are in a bad spot anyway. They're not good this year. Kind of saw that coming. But anyways, he gets into this huge thing. He throws his glove off. He goes to his locker. He's been obviously crying at his locker. Reporters go up to him after the game to interview him. He's not fluent in English, right? Like he is very limited English, and yet they interview him. He tries to talk about what he's feeling and what went on and why he did what he was doing. He's come out and said since then that he was trying to say that he was just the worst teammate. But he did say he played for the worst team in the MLB. and anyways, I like how that all went, man. It was just a mess. He got DFA'd this morning at 31 years old, has a 3.76 ERA this year, 19 strikeouts, 1.37 whip through 26 innings. So kind of a weird situation. Whenever there's a player that's talking and it's not their native language, or if they're not 100% fluent, I just get really uncomfortable with making huge conclusions. And his son, I guess, is on a transplant list and is really ill. And so people are kind of walking back their criticisms of him this morning. It's just a big mess. It's a black eye for the MLB. I don't think it's good for the Mets, obviously. I don't think it's good for him. I don't think it's good for all the narratives around the league. I don't know. It's just kind of a sticky situation. And I hate when things like this happen. We did see that, teams are starting to talk trades, right? So obviously the Marlins have already come out and said, hey, we're pretty much in sell mode. And so that has led, analysts like Ken Rosenthal to come out and say that they think that he thinks that Jesus Luzardo is the single player most likely to be traded this summer. 26 years old, he's signed through the 2026 season. He's got a 4.18 ERA, 50 strikeouts, 1.14 whip so far this year. Solid player. So I agree with Ken. I think that he will be on the move. There's a lot of teams that are already starting to. So the Rockies are already talking about guys that they may or may not have available. There's players like Mahone on the Rockies, and then Ruiz on the Rockies that teams are starting to sniff around and see if those guys are available. Things are going to get really spicy, man. I love the trade deadline. I know Ethan does too. The trade deadline is honestly one of the most exciting parts of the season other than the end. My 2 favorite parts of the MLB season are the trade deadline and then the last month as I'm scoreboard watching every game basically that could have playoff implications for the Mariners. Absolutely a blast, right? So all of September and then the trade deadline. So that's coming in hot. That'll be in the next couple months. We're going to start hearing more and more buzz about that. We'll talk more in the division updates because we do have a team in the division that is already talking about selling as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But the biggest news around the league as of right now is that Mr. Hernandez, the umpire, Angel Hernandez, is retiring. And that is good news for baseball. He's been horrendous. He's had a lot of other umpires and even guys around the league saying like, hey, he's a great dude, which is fine. I love that he's a good dude. That's great. But he's really bad at his job. And it's been really frustrating for years to watch games that he's umpiring. You just know that you're in for it. The players are always getting really frustrated with him, which leads to ejections, which leads to longer games, which leads to, it just is, honestly, here's the deal. If he's a great dude, great. Love that. Perfect. But when Angel Hernandez is behind the dish, you know it's going to be a bad game with bad calls, and you're just going to have to put up with it. So what I will say is this: good for him for retirement. Congratulations in retirement. Go enjoy it. But that being said, bon voyage, hasta la vista. Thanks for playing. I'm glad. So Angel Hernandez is out of the league. He's done. He retired, and we're moving on. So that's great news for everyone across the league, and I think that's a fantastic spot to end our Around the League updates. Let's get into our Mariners updates. All right. So again, we started our week last week, or we had recorded all the way up through the second game with the Yankees. So we were pretty high on what we had done. Obviously, we had lost 2 of 3 against the Orioles, which, was going to be what it was going to be. Tough team from the AL. And then winning the first 2 of the Yankees. So we were kind of flying high. We were hoping that we might be able to steal the series. So I'll get into the game logs here in just a second. But there's been some major updates that have happened since that time. So first of which, Mariners traded Blake Hunt, which is really surprising, to be honest. Sebi Zavala has not been great, and Blake Hunt's been raking in AAA. I mean, raking, hitting for power in the mid 300s for average, just doing fantastic. But the Mariners did see an opportunity because the Orioles DFA'd Mike Baumann, and so they wanted to jump the list of teams that would be able to get him. And so they ended up trading while he was still in that window after you DFA where you can still trade players. And we traded Blake Hunt to the Orioles for Mike Baumann and minor league catcher Michael Perez. In that move, we also optioned Cody Bolton, which, praise God, he has been really rough. Every time he came into the games, it felt like he was giving up at least 1 run. He's got to go back down to AAA and figure this thing out before being called back up. Mike Baumann, it's actually really interesting. The players came out and said, I guess they were the ones asking the front office to go get him. So they had faced him before in the Orioles series. And then when they heard that he got DFA'd and that he was available, they're like, this guy's nasty, go get him. And then it was really weird because the first game after we DFA'd him, he's like on a flight, gets to the ballpark. They put him in to that first game, like with the squad. I mean, dude doesn't even have his name on the locker yet, and he's playing in a game, and then surprisingly struggles. And then people are starting to be like, oh man, what a bad trade. I'm like, dude, lay off. Like, I'm going to give this guy like this appearance is, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. He just got off the plane. He has nothing set up. He probably doesn't even have the right colored cleats, right? Like, he's in a weird spot. We're not going to make a bunch of conclusions on one outing, right? Because he didn't do great the first outing that he had. Now, had his second outing of the year yesterday, and I'll talk about that when we get to it in the Houston series, and he was awesome. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, an interesting trade at this point. Jerry Dipoto always looking for a good trade, but especially hearing that from his players for a guy that was available through DFA, could get him for fairly cheap. Trading a backup catcher for could be stud reliever. Not a bad trade value-wise, but it is interesting because Cal is taking the majority of innings. His health is always a concern with just getting dinged up with the position. But what we did see is that Mitch Garver actually jumped behind the plate last night in a start against the Astros and caught 6 innings. So that might be something that they're moving to in the future, where they kind of have 3 catchers that they're going through, and so maybe they just didn't see a path for Blake Hunt. And Blake Hunt's value probably isn't going to be any higher than it was right when they traded him because of how well he was playing in AAA. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. It is a bummer to lose a guy that was swinging really well that you saw as a potential replacement for Sebi. But at this point, Sebi Zavala is still in the squad, still the backup catcher to Cal, and still going to probably be taking a lot of those right-hand reps. So we'll see where that ends up. One of the cool things we did see was that Bliss got called up. So Ryan Bliss, you guys have heard us if you've been listening to the show since the beginning. We've talked about Ryan Bliss a ton ever since we traded for him in the Diamondbacks trade in that Diamondbacks trade that got us Canzone and Bliss and Rojas in exchange for Paul Sewald. They actually all 3 started in the same game, that first game that Bliss got called up. So that was kind of cool. He looked great, man. So he was barreling balls. He still hasn't got his first hit as of today, but he was barreling balls up and just hitting it right at Altuve, hit him twice. It was funny. Bliss literally gets into the game against Houston, and the very first pitch of the game, Altuve pops one out to him, and he hits it super high and in the wind, and Bliss is like dancing around underneath it, and you're like, oh gosh, like don't drop your first rep. But of course the ball finds you, right? Like typical baseball fashion, ball finds you, doesn't matter. But anyways, it was really interesting. His at-bats looked great late against Houston in where he led to a walk, so not yesterday, but the day before. Again, we'll get into that in the game logs. But Bliss, his arm isn't as strong as you would hope. So hopefully that will continue to develop. But overall, his outings so far have been great and contributed. I mean, he scored the winning run of the game on Tuesday. So I'll get to that in a second. One thing I did want to bring up is that Haniger, if Garver starts catching more frequently, you could make an argument to see Haniger as a DH more frequently rather than right field. And especially with Canzone back up healthy, you could really see them start to shift those strategies. Now, initially when we signed Garver, it was to be only a DH. Our goal is to keep him healthy, and you keep him healthy by not catching. Well, he hasn't been hitting very well, so the one thing we brought him in for, he's not doing. And so it makes sense. I guess his wife came up with the suggestion that they should move him to spot catch, and hopefully that would get him going, just being more involved in the game. But it is interesting to look at Haniger's splits. So as a right fielder, he has a 195 batting average, 251 on base percentage, 299 slug, 550 OPS with a 7.2 walk percentage and 28 K percentage. As a DH, he's batting 385. Has a 467 on base percentage, 731 slug, and a 1.197 OPS with a 13.3% walk percentage and a 26 K percentage. Now, it's kind of a limited. He hasn't DH'd a ton this year, but it is something to at least look at. And if Haniger is going to produce in that DH role, and especially with how Canzone's playing in the field, now there were a lot of people, and Ethan being one of them, and he owes Canzone some words on this show at some point. I know he mentioned it a little bit last week, but like there might be some more there because Canzone in the outfield has made some plays that Haniger is not making that are making huge impacts on the game. Literally kept a game against Houston that was tight yesterday, where exactly what it was because he had a diving play out in right field. I'm just saying I don't mind seeing Canzone in the field more than Haniger. I think that makes a lot of sense as much as we can. It's really funny whenever guys, this is totally baseball, right? There's always going to be a little superstition in there. They have not played in a game at home in any other uniform other than their home whites. They are on a hot streak with those things. So they played all 4 games against Houston. They're playing it today, literally in like 10 minutes when this game starts. They're also playing in their home white. So kind of funny. Another fun addition to the ballpark that I'm excited to see next time I'm there is they play the Tyler Saucedo. You play 9 innings. You play 9 innings. They played at the park right before Munoz came out a couple of games ago. And I guess it was Munoz's idea, dude. Like, that's funny. Like, I love that. That's going to get people psyched up. Scott made a joke that he's probably going to be invited to like raise the 12th man flag or something at a Seahawks game. And they're going to play that video and the crowd's going to go nuts, right? Like it's the version of Pete Carroll standing up on the locker saying, you can't win a game in the first quarter, like all that stuff. So it'll be really funny to see how they continue to use that. But Taylor Saucedo, dude, what a dude. Like you can't, like what more can you say about this guy? He grew up, he played at Tahoma High School, was a dude there. He's a Seattle everything fan. And so to see him like be a Seattle guy and then have everyone just embrace him and him be successful. And honestly, our bullpen kind of struggled when he was gone. So I just love to see that, man. Like that's just a great addition. Like a guy that's a Seattle guy, being a Seattle legend, having a quotable line that everybody really grabs onto. But him being a glue guy is really interesting to see. They struggled when he was gone. And then when he comes back, our bullpen was nails. So it seems like he's a glue guy that like everybody loves having there with him. So it, obviously that's kind of all finicky and like, who knows, but it is interesting to see nonetheless. It is funny though, to see the Mariners that we have, that we are 5 games above 500 and they have a -3 run differential entering today's game. Like what a weird season. And that we're up 3.5 games on Texas. So it's just kind of a funny, weird season so far. We're a third of the way through. We're a little over a third of the way through now. And it's just been a really weird season. It doesn't feel like we have a first place team. But then every time you look at the standings, we are, and you're like, okay, here we are. We did see Urias finally get optioned down to AAA. He was really struggling. Yes, he had slug numbers. Yes, people wanted to fight for it. The last probably 3 weeks before he got optioned, struggled, was not doing well. He's brought in to hit left-handed pitching and was not doing that well. So they brought up Jonathan Clase back up. And there's arguments to be made that Clase's bat's not that great either. However, fast guy in the outfield, makes plays, and then really good for late game pinch running situations, which he has been used in those roles since he's been called back up. So that's been cool. Mariners PR had a couple notes that I thought were really interesting. Cal has 70 career home runs, and he's only one of 9 catchers in MLB history with 70 plus home runs in the first 4 seasons. I got into a tiff this week with a guy on X because he was of the belief that we should not extend Cal. And I'd be interested to see what you guys have to say about that. I just think that's dumb, personally. Cal is the definition of a franchise catcher where he's a leader. He manages our pitching staff extremely well. It's noticeable when he's not in there. He has power numbers. He hits in clutch moments. He's beloved by the fans. Why would you not extend this guy? So right now he's extended. Or right now, the way that his contract is, he still has another 3 years with the club before his current deal expires. So everyone's arguing that we should wait. We should keep Harry Ford in the wings and wait for Cal to be done. And then as soon as Cal's contract's up, then we bring up Harry Ford. I'm like, bro, Harry Ford is going to be ready to go to the MLB. He might be ready to play in the MLB this year. Like he might be an end of 2024 call up for us to hit. But my guess is he's probably our biggest trade piece. And my guess is that we will extend Cal and then we will trade Harry Ford. That's what, it's not even a hot take, dude. That's just what I'm saying I think is going to happen. It makes all the sense in the world. Cal's going to be our guy. He has already expressed he wants to stay in Seattle. He said he wants to be spoken about in the same air and breath as Dan Wilson. Says he loves playing in Seattle. Yes, I know who his agent is. I'll give you one guess. But it doesn't even matter. Like if a player says, hey, I want to play at this team and they offer him an extension that he likes, like he's going to take it. And I think Cal's going to be a Mariner forever. I would be shocked if they didn't extend him, just who he is and what he's done so far in his career and what he means to this team. I mean, in the offseason, they were calling him and asking what his thoughts were on certain players before they made moves. Like, is that a player that you think they're going to get rid of? Like, he's probably one of the core 3 guys. I'm speaking about him in the same vein that I would about JP and Julio. Right, those are arguably the 3 biggest names on our team. JP is our captain, right? We have Julio, and then we have Cal. Those are our 3 core pieces to this young team. And then obviously our pitchers, whatever. I'm talking non-pitchers. So I'm just looking at this going, I don't think he's going anywhere. That's silly. Another note from the Mariners PR is that George Kirby has 21 quality starts with 0 walks in his career, most in the MLB since he made his debut. And the next closest is Zach Eflin and Zach Gallen with 13. He has 21. They have 13. 21 quality starts with 0 walks in his career. He really is the Greg Maddux of this generation, man. It's really fun to watch. Him not pitching outside the zone does come back to haunt him a little bit. We'll talk about that in one of the game logs here in just a second. But that being said, it's still a great stat to have. When you limit walks, it just gives your team a better chance to win. So last couple pieces of news here. A list came out that were basically potential landing spots for Bo Bichette, and they listed out the top 10 teams, and the Mariners they had at number 2. And I'm like, what? Like, first of all, like JP's not going anywhere. So you're talking about bringing in Bo Bichette to play second, which defensively is probably better for him than shortstop anyway. But even still, we have Dylan Moore, who's raking right now. We have Rojas that can play at second. We have Polanco, the guy that we just brought in to play on this team. I don't see it happening. I do see this team upgrading at the deadline. I think we're going to be surprised at some of the moves that they make. They're going to have to ruffle some feathers. There might be some guys that get dropped or get traded that we don't see coming. But that being said, the price tag that Bo Bichette would need, again, we talked about Vlad Jr. last week. I just don't see any of those guys happening. They do have a year and a half left on their deal currently, and then you'd want to extend them. So you're talking you want to trade for these guys that are on a downtrend this year. Toronto's not playing well. They're not playing as great as they have in years past. I mean, I know Bo Bichette has had some phenomenal years in years past. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Let us know how you feel. Leave it in the comments. Go hit us up on X. Go engage with us. Leave comments on YouTube, whatever, and let us know what you think. Do you think we should sign Vlad Jr.? Do you think we should sign Bo Bichette through trade for both of those guys? Are you willing to trade our farm for those two dudes? Because it would take a lot. It would take a lot for us to trade for either one of those guys. And I just don't. I personally would not want to give up what it would take to get those guys. I'd rather see the bats that we have in the farm come up and continue to develop and then come help. I mean, if you're watching what the Modesto Nuts are doing right now, which I'm going to talk about here in just a second, I want to see those bats. I want to see those bats up with the big league club in a bad way. Let's get into, I had one last update here. The Mariners do officially, as of right now, today, last week, the Mariners do have officially the easiest remaining schedule in all of baseball. However, number 2 on that list, Houston Astros. So that's why this series is so big, and why if we can pull off the sweep today would be massive, is because then that would put us up 7.5 games over the Astros. And then we have the head-to-head and all the things. Like, there would be so many positive things that would come from that. So really hopeful that we finish off the sweep today. All right, let's get into some injury updates here. Santos is with the team. It looks like he's working up to throwing full velo. That's continuing every day, which is great. So hopefully he'll be going out on a rehab start, hopefully in the next couple weeks. If we're looking at a July arrival time, it'd be great to add him to the bullpen. Taylor Saucedo is so back, to quote Ethan. Polanco finally got put on the IL. So they totally muffed this. They should have put him on the IL the first time. Hamstrings, especially with him, have been this like finicky thing. You cannot rush someone back from a hamstring. They were waiting to see where he was. It was just foolish. They really should have just put him on the IL to begin with. They finally did, and that's what led to the Bliss call up just recently here. And then a note that happened today, right before the game, is that Luke Raley has a sore lat and not playing today. He did look like when he had a swing one of his last at-bats against Houston last night, where it looked like he was holding his back a little bit. But then I thought he was fine because he lifted up JP like he was Simba in The Lion King after he walked off the Astros last night. So I was like, oh, maybe he's fine. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. Something interesting to make sure that we are keeping tabs on. Some minors highlights for you. The Tacoma Rainiers 29 and 24. Apparently we were wrong about Dallas Keuchel last week. Everybody was reporting it that Dallas Keuchel was no longer with the Rainiers, but then he was playing for the Rainiers and he was dealing in a doubleheader. So it must have been like a contract thing where he was on the transaction list. So there must have been a transaction issue that led to that confusion, but he is still with the Rainiers and he's also doing really well. So not someone we want to drop if we don't have to. We did see that Tyler Locklear got called up and is already raking at AAA. He went 2 for 4 his first game. So he's continuing what he's already done. He was doing amazing in Arkansas in a really hard park to hit with great pitching as well, right? Most, as we've talked about on this show before, most really good pitching prospects stick around AA, and then they go right to the bigs from there. They don't typically stop at AAA. That's been true in our organization. That's true across baseball. And so he was doing what he was doing in a tough ballpark and against that level of pitching in Arkansas. Arkansas is in first place now. They're 26-20. Cole Young has been absolutely raking. He has 3 home runs in his last 5 games, and we're seeing Logan Evans just continuing to deal. I did put it out on our X. I did ask the question, do we think that Logan Evans might get called up to the bullpen in the end of the year? Like, will he be the September call-up to add to our bullpen? If he's this nasty of a weapon and he doesn't really have an open path for a starting position as of right this second, there's an argument to be made that we add him to the bullpen for a playoff run. So that is something to just put in the back of your mind. Obviously, we won't know until many months later, but if he continues to do what he's doing, I mean, he's dealing and he's going start after start after start, and his ERA is plummeting, doing a phenomenal job. And I'm like, if he stays on this pace, like, he might force their hand where they're going to see it and be like, man, he could help the club right now. So interesting thought. We'll check back in on that obviously later in the year and see if that ends up coming to fruition. Modesto did have a 5-game losing streak, but they are back and in force. So they are 31-14. They're in first place by a mile. Ty Pete came back from a high ankle sprain a lot sooner than expected, which was great. We see an Arroyo crushing, and they're back to just winning games by double digits. They have a 119 run differential right now. 119 runs in 45 games. In 45 games, they've developed a run differential of 119. This is what I'm talking about, folks. This is what I'm talking about. This is the offense that I want to see added to this core of young pitching. When we get the overlap, which we're not there yet, we're not even close to there yet. When we get the overlap where our hitting prospects are up with the big club at the same time that our big pitching prospects from the last couple of years, when those intersect, this team's going to be really good, and they're going to be really good for a long time. Like, they're building this farm exactly the way you're supposed to. We will lose guys. This trade deadline, I have a feeling the Mariners are going to go all in, as they should. They're going to revamp their lineup. They're going to probably let go of some guys. They're going to trade some guys. They're going to trade some of our farm that's going to sting a bit, but I think they're going to keep this core together. And you're talking about, so Arroyo, you're talking about Ty Pete, you're talking about Colt Emerson, you're talking about Cole Young. You're just talking Lazaro Montes. You're talking about guys that are dudes, Aiden Smith, like guys that people aren't even talking about. Like, there's so many hitters in our system right now that when those waves crash, if they're still in our system, they're going to make us so good so fast if they continue to develop the way that they are. So Modesto continues to get me pumped. Everett's not doing fantastic. They're 20-26. Cali did get the call up to Everett, which was exciting to see. He hasn't done great so far. Last time I looked, he only had 2 hits, had 20 strikeouts. So it's going to take some time for him to adjust. That is one of the downsides to rushing guys up the ranks, in that you don't want to do that and kill their confidence. So they are learning that lesson the hard way with him right now. In the Arizona Complex League, we're 9-9. Felnin Celestin continues to rake, batting .338, 429 OPP, 967 OPS with 14 RBI. Just crushing. So across the minors, for the most part, our minor league affiliate teams are doing great. Our development and players are doing fantastic. And it's exciting to see, man. It's exciting to see, to have a team that is in first place and in a spot to compete in the playoffs this year. That obviously needs to still be augmented and worked around to get to actually be a World Series team. We're not quite there yet, but to have that happening and simultaneously also having a good farm is awesome. Because normally you have a really, really good big league team, but you get a good big league team by depleting your farm. Or you have a really good farm because you're trying to build up to be a good major league team. It doesn't happen very often where you have 6 players in the top 100 prospects in all of baseball and you're in first place. So we're in a good spot now, and we're in a good spot for the future. It's a lot to be excited about. So let's get into our game logs really quick. We did lose back-to-back games in New York after we won the first two. So it was at least good to win those first two to guarantee the split between the two. Miller started the first one, went 6 innings, gave up 5 hits, 5 earned runs, only had 4 Ks on 78 pitches. They came out swinging early and often. They were hunting the fastball. Judge hit a home run in the first. Soto had 2 home runs off of Miller. One was a 2-run shot. One was a solo shot. Cortez kept the Mariners off balance all day. Didn't even get a run off of him. The only bright spot was when Luke Weaver, Mariners legend, came in relief, and Cal hit a 3-run bomb off him, which is cool. But then Voth came in, and Verdugo hit a 2-run bomb off him. So honestly, we weren't really in this game for the majority of it. The entire time that Cortez was out there, we didn't even get a run. Lucky to be no hit, to not be no hit, I should say. And so anyways, just kind of a bummer start in New York, but still have a chance to win the series. We don't. Castillo starts game 4 in New York. We lose 5-0. Castillo did only give up 2 earned runs through 5 innings, but it was shocking. He was getting hit really hard, really often. He pitched 91 pitches, only had 3 strikeouts, so very unlike Castillo, had 3 walks. So the fact that he gave up only 2 runs through 5 innings was miraculous. But Luis Gil, man, holy smokes, just total tip your hat type of game. He was phenomenal. Stanton hops in, gets a home run off Castillo. Judge hits a home run. Did I mention he's catching fire? Like, Judge is just absolutely killing us the back end of this series. And then just nothing going on for the offense. Gil worked into the 7th, and then their bullpen shut it down. Their bullpen is one of the best in baseball statistically. We did get to them those first 2 games, which is cool, but the back 2 were not great. So on a 2-game losing streak, we go to game 1 versus Washington. And this is a team that's not good and doesn't hit a lot of home runs. And then in the first game, we lose 1-6, and they have 3 home runs off of us, off of Kirby. 2 off of Kirby, 1 off of Voth. And so you're just like, man, this team that like doesn't hit home runs, hits home runs, like, of course. Like, just struggling. Kirby went 6 innings, had 6 hits, 5 earned runs, 1 walk, and 3 strikeouts. Just a non-typical start for Kirby. We did start the game with a home run from JP, so we felt really good about that start, but that was the end of our offense. So we got that first home run in the first inning, and that was it. We lost 6-1. Kirby started the game going 9 up, 9 down to start the game. But then in the 4th inning, wheels started to come off a little bit. Washington was much more aggressive. You see Garcia Jr. hit a 3-run bomb in the 4th, and then Kirby gave up a 2-run bomb to Ruiz in the 6th. Voth comes into the game, gives up a solo shot to Rosario, and just not a great game to begin with. So we get into game 2. This one was a really irritating game for me. I'll just be really honest. Logan Gilbert started, gave us 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, no walks, and 4 Ks. He was only at 78 pitches when Scott pulled him. So that was really frustrating. We found out later, Scott said it was because of it was hot and it was humid and whatever. I'm like, okay, I get that, but like, we're on a 3-game skid. We just lost 3 games in a row. And this is when Houston was surging and they were winning a bunch of games. And I'm like, man, like, now is not the time to take our foot off the gas. Pulling him at 78 pitches, like, I know they're trying to keep him healthy all year, so it's not the worst decision in the world, but still, just with where we were at in the season, it just felt really dumb. And honestly, Washington just played a lot of small ball. So they bunted a lot. They were moving guys over. They were hitting sacrifice flies. The only run that Logan gave up that game was an infield single, which was on a swinging bunt, and then an actual bunt single, and then a sac fly. Was dialed other than that. And we saw Julio got his first home run in the last month. Got his 3rd overall for the season. So it was great to see him get his power back, hit at 433 feet. So not a cheap one by any means. But then Scott pulls Gilbert a little earlier than most people thought. And then Spire came in and struggled right away. Thornton comes in with runners on and immediately gives up 2 runs, and that was it. So it is one of those things where, like, I do not say that the only reason why we lost was because Scott pulled Logan prematurely. I think that definitely played a component. We can be critical of more than one thing at a time. I know that's too nuanced for X, right? But we can be critical of multiple things at the same time. One, I think that Scott should not have pulled Logan that soon. But We lost that game because the offense wasn't able to produce anything against a pretty bad Washington team. So pretty frustrating. So we go from losing the Baltimore series, but squeaking one out, starting the New York series off really strong with 2 wins. And then we lose 4 games in a row, right? So all of a sudden, Houston's climbing back in this thing. We're looking down the barrel of this Houston series, and we got one more game left against Washington. We need to do something to win. That was when Brian Wu started, and we did win 9-5. So Wu went 6 innings, gave up 5 hits, 3 runs, 0 walks, only 1 strikeout on 70 pitches. So again, they're still ramping him up. That one actually makes sense to me of where he was at. He was also getting hit really hard. So the fact that he only had given up 3 earned runs was honestly a blessing. But it did feel like a must win, right? Because I was, as I was saying, a 3-7 road trip feels drastically different than a 4-6 road trip. 4-6 isn't great, but it's not going to kill you. 3-7, that feels brutal. So it's good that we finished on a win with Washington to build some momentum going into the Houston series. Patrick Corbin was pitching on the other side. He's one of the worst statistical pitchers in baseball, and we just didn't do a ton. So J-Rod did have another home run. Ty had a 2-run shot, but we were only able to put 4 up against Patrick. And that's honestly, he's one of the worst pitchers in baseball. Like, we need to be able to put up more than that. Wu only gave up 1 earned run through 6 and was cruising with his pitch count, and everyone was in a great spot. But then in the 7th inning, he gave up a bunt single and then another single, and then Scott pulled him. Stanek came into the game and immediately gave up 4 runs. So gave it up on a sac fly and then a 3-run home run. So we lose the lead and we're now down 4-5. Floro comes in, who's been lights out for Washington. He's been one of the best relievers in baseball for about a month. JP comes in, hits a double. Julio hits a single. France hits a single, and that all adds up to 2 runs. The Mariners getting the lead again, up 6-5. And then in the 9th, they tack on another 3 with some small ball of their own. Luke Raley got a bunt single. Then we had a bases loaded walk and then another Julio RBI single where we tacked on 3 more to finish up 9-5. So we needed this win, period. We needed this win. Going into Houston series, it's a 4-game set against Houston. Houston at the time, like, they're kind of in a move. They were only 3.5 games down. So before the Houston series started, we were talking about it. It was like, hey, if we get swept, Houston will be in first place by a half game. That's crazy to think about. Like, if we get swept this series, like, the whole season drastically looks different. And I know that's a little hyperbolic to say at the end of May, but a third of the way through, you lose the little lead that you had in the division in one series. That would have been brutal. But I have great news. If you haven't been paying attention, that did not happen. So game 1 against Houston was another Miller start. Way better. They were hunting his fastball early like in New York, but Miller was working backwards on guys, was using his splitter a lot earlier in the count, and again in working backwards basically against their big bats. He went 6 innings, only gave up 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 6 Ks with 93 pitches. And so we saw Valdez on the other side of this game. We went and got 3 runs on him in the first when he was struggling. So JP had a double, J-Rod single, Garver walk, Calsack fly that should have been a double. I mean, he pieced it, and Myers made a great play in center field. And then Ty France came up huge with a clutch single. Haniger came up huge with a clutch single, and then Valdez settled in. So Valdez only gave up those 3, and that was it. We couldn't get any offense going after that, but it didn't matter because because our pitching locked it down. Miller had a tough 5th, giving up 2 after a handful of singles and a sac fly, but stopped the bleeding with getting Kyle Tucker out in a clutch fashion. And the bullpen was nails, which is a common theme through this series. Up until today, so the first 3 games against Houston, the bullpen has only given up 2 hits. No runs, 2 hits. All of the bullpen. So they went from really struggling, like I said. Taylor Saucedo comes back from injury. Coincidence? I don't know. But all of a sudden, bullpen back to being who they are and being absolutely nails. Game 2 versus Houston, Castillo start. We won 4-2. Castillo goes 6 innings, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, 95 pitches. This is the game that was kind of frustrating that, like, we should have scored a lot more. So Hunter Brown was starting. He's not great. He's gotten into a lot of trouble, even against us when we were down in Houston. But Hunter Brown kind of kept us in check. Rojas got a leadoff single, or not a leadoff. He got a single in the first, stole second. Julio hit him home with an RBI. So exactly how it's supposed to work. The only 2 runs that Castillo gave up was a 2-run home run to Bregman that was a slider off the plate that he like threw his bat to. It happened to find the barrel. And when it happened, I was watching, I was like, oh, that's a pop out. Like I literally looked at my phone. Like I thought that out was already going to be accounted for. And then it sailed over the fence. And you're like, how on God's green earth did that go over the fence? Like that's crazy. There was some wind involved. The wind was swirling this game. It was kind of weird. But we did have a rally. So we were down 2-1 basically this whole game. But in the bottom of the 8th, Haniger doubled off Presley. Clase pinch ran for Haniger. Bliss came in, took a fantastic at-bat where he was trying to bunt him over, ended up walking in the same at-bat, and everybody's giving him credit for that afterwards. Rojas doubled down the right line where it went right over Abreu's mitt, which was hilarious. That scored Clase and moved Bliss to third. So we were on second and third at this point. Julio hit a slow chopper down the third baseline. Bregman comes in charging, tries to looks at home to throw out Bliss, realizes he doesn't have a play, tries to throw it to first and overthrows first, totally little leagues it. And Bliss and Rojas both score, which gets us up 4-2. Stanek comes in for the close. So Munoz was down this game because we'd used him, and Stanek came in, shut it down. And I'm just saying, man, I don't know if 2023 team, I don't know if they win this game. And then coming into last night's game was a Verlander start. From the beginning, this was going to be the toughest game for us to win. Hands down, going to be the toughest game for us to win. Kirby came in, went 6 innings, only gave up 6 hits, 1 earned run, 0 walks, 8 Ks, 94 pitches. Kirby looking back to like being like Kirby. He loves pitching against Houston. He loves it. Dude gets fired up. You could tell he's pissed off the whole time. Verlander was lights out too, though. So it was a total pitching duel back and forth. The only mistake that Verlander made was a top of the zone fastball to Canzone, which he hit for a home run in the 5th inning. And then Kirby gave up his only run in the 4th when the Astros strung together a couple singles. But other than that, that was it. Spire, Voth, and Munoz, all nails, came into the game before the game would go to extras. We did have a chance to win it in the bottom of the 9th, though. And this did create some controversy amongst Mariners fans. Julio hit a single, stole second. Diaz threw the ball to center field, trying to throw out Julio on that play. Julio moves on to third base, so we only have 1 out. Julio on third base. Ty France is up to bat. We're like, hey, dude, just hit a deep fly ball. Let's win this thing. Ty ends up walking. Rojas comes up to the plate, and instead of giving Rojas, a veteran who's been playing a little bit, an at bat against Hader, they brought in Ryan Bliss. So Ryan Bliss, yes, had not looked bad to this point, but hadn't even got his first MLB hit yet, and we pinch hit him. Now, it would have been an epic story for us to be talking right now that if Ryan Bliss got his first major league hit was a walk-off, that'd be cool, right? But that didn't happen. He struck out, looked real bad, and Haniger struck out as well. So we end up going to extras. Fans are not happy. Let Rojas take that at bat. Don't care if it's a lefty. Rojas is going to find a way with 1 out to get the job done. He's done it consistently all year. Pulling him out in that moment doesn't feel great. We go to the 10th inning, go to extras. Baumann comes in. So I did refer to this earlier in the show. He gets his second appearance as a Mariner and does phenomenal. So you get the inherited run on second. He gets a soft pop out to start the inning to Canzone. No advance on the throw. Then he gets a fly out to shallow left. No advance on that throw. And then Altuve grounds out to second or to shortstop. So does a great job, gets us out of the inning, doesn't give up a run. We're in fantastic shape. And I'm like, boom, told you he'd be fine. Take it with a grain of salt. Like, he's now settled in. He's been with the team for a few games now, understands what's going on, probably figured out his living situation, right? Like, got established, comes out, does great. We get to the bottom of the 9th. Canzone does his job. So again, we get our inherited runner on second base. Canzone does his job where he grounds out to second base, which moves him over. Clase is pinch running at this point. Cal and Rayleigh walk, and then JP hits a walk-off sac fly. So we win the series against Houston, which is massive, which makes today, yes, we want to complete the sweep. That's very important. But if we do lose today, that isn't the end of the world. Now, we should win today because we're facing one of the worst pitchers in baseball that basically his name just looks like spaghetti. And I'm just saying, like, we should absolutely rake off this guy. I'm recording and the game has actually started 18 minutes ago. So I hopefully am talking about a game that's already happening and we're already winning because we are taking advantage of a not great pitcher. And Logan is absolutely shutting him down. So we shall see. Let's get into our division updates. All right, some quick division updates here. Houston was inching closer and closer to the division lead again. I've said it and I'll say it again. They're not going anywhere. Even with us winning this series right now, hopefully sweeping it, Houston is not going anywhere. They will be in the hunt in September, I promise. I would love to be wrong. I would love to eat my words and be absolutely wrong on this, but they were starting to get closer and closer until this series. The Mariners pushed them back down, which is great. We need to keep them there. So that'll hopefully continue. But again, like I said, they have a really easy schedule remaining as well. They are not going anywhere. Texas is also starting to get healthy. They're starting to get some guys back. We're starting to see them surge. They're starting to win more games. We're not gaining a lot of ground on the division because Texas is winning the same time we are. Seager has 8 home runs in 8 games, so he's catching fire. The only downside, they did see Michael Lorenzen exited his last start with an injury. We'll see where that ends up panning out, but Texas is starting to look like Texas again. You knew that was only a matter of time as well, which is why we were screaming from the rooftops that we needed to get these wins, especially against like teams like the Nationals, where we absolutely needed these games early. So hopefully we continue to take down series and just continue moving forward that way. The Angels are the team that I did want to talk about here at this point that are listening to trade offers. So they've already come out and said that they're listening to trade offers. It'll be really interesting to see what comes of that and see what players are available. The guy that is the most interesting to me, which I don't know if they're going to move or not, but Kevin Pillar, who's come in to play in Trout's absence while he's been hurt. He's been crushing it. So they're not winning games, but Kevin is himself batting. I think he's like over 340, has a couple home runs. Like he's doing great for the Angels. And so that might be one player that they are looking to move at the deadline. We'll see. But the Angels organization that came out today and said that they are listening to trade offers already. So let that happen. And then Oakland as well, continuing to do what they're doing. They're 11 games under 500, back to losing the way that they thought they would, developing trade targets at this point. I could see them moving, half their roster. I mean, Abraham Toro probably is a big name that'll get traded, ex-Mariners legend. And then obviously Mason Miller. So we'll see what that ends up looking like for the Athletics. But the current standings as they stood this morning, as I was prepping the show, Angels are in last place at 21-34. Athletics are in 4th at 23-34. The Astros are at 24-32. The Rangers are at 27-29, and the Mariners, the only team over 500, is sitting at 31-26, which is their high watermark for the season at 5 games over 500. We'll see if they break that today and win against Houston to go 6 games above 500 and 7.5 games over Houston. That all adds up and would be huge. So that is our look around the division. Let's get into the player of the week. My player of the week is, there's a couple of guys that have really stepped up the last week, but the one that I think that has really held this team together is Munoz. So I just have to give him credit. He has only given up 1 run in his last 10 outings, and even then that run didn't matter. It was when we were up 3 and he gave up 1. He's been absolutely nails, man. So as the bullpen really struggled on the road trip, the games that he did come in and pitch when we were up by a small margin, he's just been absolutely nails. Nobody's even getting close to him. He absolutely dominated last night against the Astros. It's one of those things where when you have a closer like this, it's something else. One thing I didn't talk about in the Around the League, we did see Edwin Diaz go down on the IL. So sad to see, but he has definitely been firmly replaced by Andres Munoz, and excited to see us add Santos and other pieces to this. Like I said, our bullpen has really turned it around just in this Houston series, and hopefully now that Taylor Salcedo's back and provide some of that glue, that continues. So that's my player of the week this week. I think Ethan would definitely agree that Munoz deserves the nod for player of the week this week. Let's get into the hot corner. My hot corner is fairly positive, which I'm on a roll recently where I've been fairly positive about what's going on, which is fantastic. I do believe that the Mariners will complete the sweep of Houston today, and I do believe that they are going to sweep the Angels here coming up this weekend. I think that they're going to do both. The Angels are in a bad spot, and if we do that, we are going to really put ourselves in a good spot, especially in the division. But overall, just breaking through that 5-game over 500 thing and really start to take this thing on a run and getting our record far above that 500 mark the best possibly can before the All-Star break. We want to give ownership every reason possible to be super aggressive at the deadline and go fill out this team with guys that are going to go help us win the championship. So we'll see what that looks like. But my hot corner is I think the sweep will continue today, go through the Angels series, and that when we get into next week, we're going to be happy campers preparing for our show next week. So guys, thanks so much for listening. That's it for this week. I appreciate you listening to me, even though Ethan isn't here to provide the color and the humor that he provides. I know it's not as entertaining of a show, but wanted to keep you apprised of what was going on with the Mariners. Appreciate your flexibility and patience as we're continuing to figure out how to do this show. And man, we've been really blessed to see that we're getting the same, 50 to 60, somewhere in there, subscribers that are listening to our show every week. Share it with your friends. Go add us on any of your podcast platforms if you haven't already. Go go rate it. The ratings really help, so please go do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. Leave comments. Go engage with us. Go follow us on X. Go engage with us there. All of that adds up. Thank you so much. For this week, this is the Soto Mojo Podcast.